We can add a couple of more points to the kinds of issues that climate action keeps facing in the real world. I have written a lot of blogs on it that you can read up, but I like a couple of examples. For example, Germany is one of the most progressive countries on climate action. It still burns coal and it has plans to zero out coal not anytime soon, okay, compared to the urgency of the action that is often portrayed by Germany when arguing with the other countries. And then there is this German industry, Volkswagen, which was caught by cheating on emissions by using a computer software in its car. And there is a MIT study then that argues that actually the additional emission because of that emission cheating actually resulted in maybe more than 1,000 deaths in some East European countries, the poor countries that bought Volkswagen cars. So they are now fined and so on, but basically Volkswagen is now trying to portray itself as environmentally friendly and having learned a lesson. The point is that when corporate profits are at stake, things can go haywire because they may find a way of cheating their way to looking environmentally friendly. And the other thing to remember is that Volkswagen is not owned by some one person. It is owned by people who own the shares. So if as a person, when people tell you that we should divest from oil, for example, how do you do that? Unless there is an alternative, can you really go and throw away or sell off your shares? But maybe that's the way to put pressure on them to move more towards renewables, or at least reduce the opposition to renewables, right? So human daily life's pressures never go away, as we saw in the election that's going on now in the US as well. People didn't care about the pandemic, and they most definitely are not so worried about the climate action when the pandemic and the shutdowns have caused so many economic problems for so many people. So they just want to get back to work and get on with their lives. So economy and the pocketbook issues are never going to go away. So climate change itself has to become part of the economy, solutions, employment, right? You don't buy an iPhone because it's carbon neutral. You stand in line to buy it probably because you love it. So if you make things that people love that are good for the environment, then you don't have to tell them that this is good for the environment. So solutions have to be a part of the big change that has to come. The other interesting example I find is the issue of Japan bucking global trends. Japan again embraces coal power, and this is in 2018, just 2 years ago. Okay, why? Japan was already having ups and downs with its carbon emissions, and then came the earthquake in 2011 and the tsunami and the damage to the Fukushima Daiichi, I think, the nuclear power plant, and the radiation and significant problems in power, depth, the radiation getting into the ocean and going all the way across to the west, and so on. And obviously a small country like Japan, which has so little land, did get spooked by the nuclear accident, and it used that as a way to justify moving into coal. So unrelated things, natural hazard like earthquake, natural hazard like tsunami causing an accident, can completely swing you away from climate action. So climate action will always be it can always take a back seat when pressing issues of economic development or security of life and property come in the way, right? That's not something you can deny or you can prevent people from worrying about. Nonetheless, there are lots of good news, of course. All the countries are at the table negotiating climate treaties. Some US just voted to get out of it, but obviously, depending on who wins the presidential election, US will get back into it, but corporations within the US are taking their own action as well, especially the big four: Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Apple. Need a lot of power, and they're making their own plans. So again, profit is their main motive, but they sell things to us and we buy them as well. So we are all in this together. So the example of adaptation actions is another piece of good news. Public and private sectors across Africa, Europe, Asia, and in the oceans, especially small islands, have taken many actions. Most in Africa, most national governments are initiating governance systems for adaptation, focused on disaster risk management, adjustment in technology, infrastructure, ecosystem-based approaches, managing fisheries by not just catching one species, but worrying about how that species fits into the ecosystem, basic public health measures, and so on. Europe is focused on developing all levels of government, adaptation planning integrated into coastal and water management systems. Small islands have diverse physical and human attributes. They are some of the most vulnerable, and they are not the big contributors. So you have to also decide who's responsible for their climate problems. Community-based adaptation has been shown to generate larger benefits when delivered in conjunction with the other development activities. So in general, the small islands are small by themselves, but they are usually in a cluster. So they can create community-based adaptation plans on their island that worries about tourism, which tends to be the main income. They also sell the fishing rights around their islands to rich countries. So all these kinds of things become a part of the solution. Adaptation actions. The ocean, international cooperation and marine spatial planning are starting to facilitate adaptation to climate change with constraints from challenges of spatial scale and governance issues. Right now there is a UN Decade of the Ocean going on. Georgia Tech, which leads lots of the coastal action and open ocean action with great people like Emanuele Di Lorenzo and Kim Cobb and the whole team at Georgia Tech, which is putting together big teams of all countries and many agencies like the World Resource Institute, Nature Conservation, Nature Conservancy, and so on and so forth. So there is good news, of course, that people are realizing that climate change is a problem, and they will continue to struggle, but they will continue to hopefully move in the right direction in terms of taking collective action. That's the big thing here now. All global commons, collective action is needed. I will check if this construction noise is getting into my recordings. If it is, I have to redo it.